Faces appearing on a Spanish kitchen floor. A Redditor takes a picture of 3 dogs, except they only have 2, and glowing balls of light over Washington, D.C., zipping faster than jets, hovering over the White House, disappearing when fighter planes went to investigate. These are disturbing photos that suggest we're living in a simulation. What you're looking at here is a photo of one of the Belmez faces. What are the Belmez faces, you ask? The story begins in 1971 in a little Spanish town called Belmez. A woman named Maria Gomez Camara looks down at her kitchen floor and swears that she sees a human face forming in the concrete. Not like a stain or a crack that kind of resembles something, an actual detailed face. Her husband and son freaked out, smashed the thing with a pickaxe, poured new concrete, but within days, another face appeared. Word spread, and the mayor himself told the family not to destroy this new one. Instead, chunks of the floor were cut out and taken away to be studied. Meanwhile, people started flocking to this house, which became known as the House of the Faces. And the faces didn't stop. Over the years, new ones popped up. Men and women, young and old. Some even seemed to change slightly over time, like they were alive in the concrete. Paranormal investigators floated the idea that it was thoughtography. Basically that Maria's house or her subconscious was somehow imprinting these faces from the spirit world onto the floor. Skeptics have tested samples and come back with theories about paint or chemicals, but in 2014, a forensic team tried to recreate the phenomenon, but they couldn't pull it off. Their conclusion? Inconclusive. To this day, these faces are still a mystery. This image was shared by Reddit user OKTwist3079. Doesn't look to be anything odd in this image at first glance. We got 3 cute dogs in Christmas outfits playing in the snow, but the Redditor only has 2 dogs. OKTwist writes, "I took this photo of my 2 dogs. So please explain how there are 3 dogs in the photo. No one was visiting and I have no idea how to use Photoshop. My mother-in-law is freaking out and I have no explanation." The fact that they're all wearing the same outfit and all in different positions, I'm just losing it. How? Now, obviously, this isn't double exposure. This was snapped on an Android phone. I'm no expert on camera glitches, but doesn't really look like one to me. Doesn't seem to be any interference in the image. Again, if you didn't have the context, you'd think this was a totally normal photo. Any ideas, folks? Genuine curiosity or hoax? Share your thoughts down below. What you're looking at here is photographic evidence of one of the most mysterious and well-documented UFO events in history. It started on the night of July 19th, 1952. Air traffic controllers at Washington National Airport picked up 7 unidentified objects on radar. Controllers said the blips looked solid, like actual aircraft. At the same time, pilots in the air were reporting strange lights moving above them. One pilot described them as glowing balls that shot across the sky faster than any jet could follow. Then radar at Andrews Air Force Base, just outside DC, confirmed the exact same objects. One point, controllers said the UFOs were hovering over the White House and Capitol building. Fighter jets were scrambled, but whenever they got close, the objects just vanished. As soon as the jets left, the UFOs came back. That little cat and mouse game happened over and over. Not just that night, but again a week later on July 26th. The press went wild. Headlines in major papers screamed, "Saucers swarm over Capitol." It got so insane that President Truman personally asked for a briefing. The Air Force didn't really have an explanation, but they just said, well, it's temperature inversion. Basically a rare weather condition that can cause issues for radar, but that of course doesn't explain the pilots who saw lights with their own eyes. Well, this car's clearly totaled. Whoever was in that car must have been pancaked to death, right? Wrong. On a November evening in 1988, Rose Benvenuto swerved to avoid hitting a stray dog in upstate New York, resulting in this brutal crash. Most people would have been killed, but somehow, remarkably, Rose walked away with barely a scratch. That's when things got even stranger, because a firefighter named Sharon Boo took pictures of the wrecked car, and in one of her shots, the one we're looking at again here, there's clearly this glowing, transparent figure hovering by the vehicle. The figure is ghost-like, you can see through it, but it's clearly there in the image. And the figure showed up not only in that print, but also on the negative, so it wasn't a development trick or double exposure. Both Rose and Sharon went on to label the figure a guardian angel, maybe the very being that saved Rose's life. Reddit user Nakupendwa posted this image. "My dad got me these when I was a youngish teenager from a trip they went on to Las Vegas," they write. "I've only ever had this one set. It was spilled in the drawer, so I started putting them back in and ... And yeah, this is pretty strange. Obviously, stuff like this can easily be faked, but let's just say this Reddit user did happen to experience this. I'd be pretty unsettled. I mean, there are only 6 spaces in that container for 6 dice. Unless someone snuck an extra one in there as a prank, I don't have a solid explanation for this."
Oh, it's weird when anti-aircraft gunners and skeptical newspaper editors all agree they saw the same thing. Hours after the attack on Pearl Harbor, coastal radars pinged an object above Los Angeles. Searchlights converged, reporters captured a glowing, blimp-shaped mass hovering above Los Angeles. By dawn, damage reports tallied shattered windows and 5 civilian deaths from falling shrapnel, but no wreckage. The War Department blamed war nerves, suggesting weather balloons, yet declassified memos show generals conceded the photos were genuine and the object unidentified. Modern image enhancement reveals a solid oval reflecting multiple beams, exactly where veterans insist they saw it. Few vacation photos raise the question, did I just capture a spy who'll run a superpower? During Ronald Reagan's goodwill walk through Moscow's Red Square, White House photographer Pete Souza snapped a candid photo of the president shaking hands with schoolchildren. Looming in the background, a blonde man with a curious half smile, eerily resembling a 30-something Vladimir Putin. At the time, Putin was a KGB officer reportedly stationed in Dresden, yet KGB doctrine often embedded operatives in crowds to quiz Reagan on policy. Kremlin spokespeople dismiss the claim, but Souza insists the likeness is no coincidence. Facial recognition algorithms run by independent analysts score the similarity at a spooky 86%. Too high for comfort, too low for certainty. When your family picnic photo ends up on the desks of British intelligence and NASA, something is not right with that white figure in the background. Jim Templeton took his 5-year-old daughter Elizabeth to Burgh Marsh overlooking Scotland's Solway Firth. He shot 3 frames, and only the middle image shows a towering figure in a gleaming white suit and helmet standing directly behind Elizabeth, yet unseen by anyone present. Kodak technicians found no sign of double exposure or tampering and actually awarded Jim free film for stumping them. Weeks later, 2 men who couldn't show their credentials, Templeton dubbed them the Men in Black, grilled him on the site where the photo was taken. Around the same time, a Blue Streak missile test in Australia was aborted when range cameras allegedly picked up 2 identical spacemen on the launch pad. No one has matched the figure's attire to any RAF, Royal Navy, or NASA prototype suit of the era. 6 decades on, the Solway spaceman still stands as Britain's most enduring photographic mystery. Imagine posing for your unit's victory portrait, only for a dead crewmate to smile over your shoulder. Taken at RAF Cranwell just days after mechanic Freddie Jackson was killed in a propeller accident, the glass plate negative shows his unmistakable face peeking between 2 airmen. Everyone in the squadron recognized him instantly. The original plate was inspected by military archivists who found no evidence of double exposure or retouching, yet Jackson's death certificate is dated 4 days before the photo session. No trick of the light explains why a man officially buried at sea appears crisp and focused among the living. Most crews watch the horizon for storms. This one watched for faces in the water. When seamen James Courtney and Michael Meehan died cleaning a cargo tank, their bodies were buried at sea. Days later, their shipmates saw 2 human faces bobbing in the froth beside the freighter. Captain Keith Tracy loaded a Kodak and caught 6 frames. The best negative was sent to Burns Detective Agency, which verified the image hadn't been tampered with and even stamped the back authentic. Oceanographers argued that white cap patterns can mimic shapes, but the silhouettes match the dead men's last crew photos right down to Courtney's broken nose.
Is this bus driving back from a Taylor Swift concert? Whoever was running the simulation when this image was taken just forgot to attend the diversity and inclusion seminar that morning. Or they just got lazy and decided to hit copy and paste and call it a day. Or I don't know, maybe they're all related. Or they could be one of those female friend groups that are all just blonde ladies, like with barely any discernible physical differences. Someone described them as maybe basic, drink a lot of Starbucks, their fiancés' names are Brad, they talk about Jesus a lot, you know the crowd. I've never actually hung out with people like this, but you know, am I reading too much into it? Probably. But am I probably right? Probably. So this is nuts. Are they doppelgangers? I mean, not only do they look very similar in size, shape, and face, but their clothes match, they have the same backpacks, their drinks are the same, for God's sakes. It seems too uncanny to be a coincidence. So there's a good chance they're also twins. If that's the case, then this is just hilarious. You don't really see adult twins dressing the exact same clothes, buying the same knapsacks and beverages, unless it's a cartoon, or possibly, in this case, a simulation. Back in October, people near Grissom Joint Air Reserve Base in Indiana got a front row seat to something strange in the sky. Multiple glowing orange orbs, at least 6, were seen darting around, hovering, flickering, and then just disappearing. Witnesses were pretty freaked out. It wasn't just what people saw with their eyes either. One observer checked their Doppler radar and noticed a massive rectangular shape with a vapor shock wave trailing behind it. That's basically a trail that happens when something moves insanely fast through the air. The shape was estimated to be about 20 miles long. Naturally, skeptics chimed in. Alejandro Rojas from Enigma Labs said it might just be military flares, pointing to the way the lights lit up and faded in a row, but that doesn't explain everything, especially since this wasn't an isolated incident. Similar UFO sightings popped up near other military bases, like in Virginia just months earlier. What you're looking at here are burns on a woman's hands, and this is a newspaper clipping of the same woman's hair starting to fall out in clumps. These unsettling images are photographic evidence of the Cash Landrum incident. On the night of December 29, 1980, 3 people in Texas had a disturbing encounter with a UFO. Betty Cash, Vicki Landrum, and Vicki's grandson Colby were driving home when they noticed this massive diamond-shaped object hovering over the trees. It was throwing off flames, extreme heat. At first, Vicki thought that this was a religious sign, something like the Second Coming. She told Betty to stop the car, but once they got out, the heat was just unbearable. The thing was so hot that when Betty touched the car, her hand burned and Vicky's handprint got seared into the dashboard. As the object suddenly started climbing back into the sky, a swarm of military helicopters appeared and surrounded it. But the aftermath is what really pushes this story into the disturbing territory. That night, all 3 of them started to feel sick. Betty ended up with blisters, her hair started falling out, and later she was diagnosed with cancer. Vicky developed a cataract. Their symptoms seemed to line up eerily well with radiation exposure. They eventually sued the US government for $20 million, pointing to those helicopters as proof that the military knew more than they were letting on, but the case was dismissed. To this day, no one can fully explain what they ran into on that empty Texas road. This is one of the most famous images ever taken of a mysterious phenomenon over the skies of Norway. In the Hasdalen Valley of Norway, people keep reporting these strange glowing lights that just can't be explained. They'll show up in the middle of the night or sometimes during the day, sometimes floating for over an hour, other times flashing across the sky in just seconds. They don't always look the same either. Sometimes they're white, sometimes red or yellow, and they'll drift slowly or dart around. Scientists have tried to explain them as some kind of natural plasma caused by the metals in the hills reacting with the environment, but that doesn't match every sighting. The movements are just too strange. That's why Hasdalen is still considered one of the most active UFO hotspots in the world.
What do you do when flooring contractors keep unearthing human portraits instead of concrete dust? In the Spanish village of Belmez, Maria Pereira noticed a stain on her kitchen floor that looked uncannily like a screaming face. When the family tried to chip it out, new faces formed, morphing week by week. National newspapers flocked in, researchers sealed the room, painted the floor with epoxy, and even removed a slab for X-ray spectroscopy. No hidden canvas, no pigment. More than 40 faces eventually appeared, some identified by locals as long-dead villagers. Skeptics blamed pareidolia, but no chemical analysis ever produced a paint recipe. You kneel to pray, click the shutter, then notice the glowing nurse hovering behind you. Diane Berthelot was recuperating from surgery, praying alone in Norfolk's 900-year-old Worstead Church. Her husband Peter snapped a quick shot on Kodak 400 film, but when the print came back, a luminous figure in a white cap sat directly behind Diane. Experts at Kodak's Hemel Hempstead lab said the outline wasn't a light leak or processing flaw. Local folklore speak of a white lady healer who appears to the sick. Diane insists she felt a sudden warmth on her neck at the exact moment Peter pressed the shutter. 7 minutes of stillness turned a nameless Parisian into humanity's first photo celebrity and its greatest unknown. While testing his daguerreotype from a rooftop overlooking a boulevard, Louis Daguerre captured a solitary figure bent over what looks like a shoe shine stand. Long exposure erased every passing carriage and pedestrian, but this one man stayed still long enough to burn into history. Nearly 2 centuries later, no records reveal his identity. Was he a cobbler's client, a water pump user, a bored man on the streets? Historians have scoured census logs and trade directories to no avail. We know the birth of street photography, but not the name of its very first star. How do you prove a lost Confederate ironclad was photographed when the only evidence is a photo of a photo that might not actually exist? Civil War buffs longed for any image of the scuttled CSS Georgia. None were known until 1985, when amateur historian John Potter claimed he'd seen one at a Georgia yard sale. He couldn't afford the asking price, I guess it was an expensive yard sale, so he photographed the photograph instead. Experts who viewed his snapshot swore the vessel's features matched written descriptions. Then the original vanished. And in 2015, Potter confessed the whole tale was a hoax, unless, he hinted, the confession itself was a second hoax hiding a very real print he planned to auction. It's like a double hoax. To this day, no one can say whether the only photo of the CSS Georgia is lost, fake, or both. Imagine discovering an entire Victorian family's holiday scrapbook without a single clue to who they were. The National Museum of Scotland's 2015 Hall of Glass Negatives included a series of beach pictures clearly taken by professional photographer W. Calder in the English resort town of Margate. Over maybe 10 summers, the same parents, 2 sons, and an infant daughter reappear, building sandcastles, posing with parasols, then aging out of the frame. No birth records, no studio ledger, and no follow-up images have surfaced. Genealogists ran the children's faces through crowd-sourced ancestry databases without a hit. For once, the camera preserves life events we can watch, but never trace.
What you're looking at here is a mysterious drone swarm that Coast Guards in New Jersey caught trailing their ship back in December. Not sure if you're all aware, but this was during a huge wave of weird drone sightings in the area. A Coast Guard crew was patrolling the Atlantic near New Jersey when they noticed that they were being followed by drones. One of the crew stated, "We were out there to see if we could spot any drones because of all these sightings. Well, we found some drones, or more accurately, they found us." The drones appeared out of nowhere around 9 p.m. and stuck with the boat for about 15 minutes. Even when the vessel changed course, the drones followed. The crew member went on to say, "Commercial airplanes don't move like that. We've been out on the water when planes were coming in for landings in New York, and trust me, you can tell the difference. We're not idiots. idiots. We know what drones look and sound like." Then the drones banked left toward the shoreline and disappeared. When asked about it, White House spokesman John Kirby gave the usual government answer, which was basically nothing to see here. "We assess that the sightings to date include a combination of lawful commercial drones, hobbyist drones, and law enforcement drones, as well as manned fixed-wing aircraft, helicopters, and even stars that were mistakenly reported as drones." He also said the Coast Guard likely mistook airliners for drones. The guardsman was not having this. He doesn't pretend to know what they were exactly, but he's clear on one thing. They, quote, "weren't the types of drones you can buy at the store. These were government drones." Tina Kalig was just looking out her window in Hill Country Village, Texas, when she spotted something weird walking through her yard. She had no idea what she was looking at. "I was inside and I looked out in the yard and saw an animal right here and thought, wow, what is that?" she said. It was moving slowly, sniffing around, and then stopped to eat berries off the ground before vanishing. Tina was able to snap a few photos and shared them online with the caption, "Unusual creature in my yard, what is it?" She was hoping someone in the neighborhood had an answer. Some said it looked like a mangy dog, others thought maybe a coyote with some sort of skin disease. A few brought up a local legend about an old mountain lion that's supposedly roamed the area for years, and several people said it looked like a chupacabra, but nobody had a definitive answer. And even experts from the local zoo were just throwing out their best guesses. Back in 2016, ghost hunter Claire Cowell claimed she captured one of the clearest photos ever taken of the infamous Black Monk of Pontefract. The photo was taken inside 30 East Drive in Pontefract, West Yorkshire, widely known as one of the most haunted houses in the UK. Claire said the image shows the, quote, "arm of a ghostly figure in a monk's robe clutching rosary beads." She believed it was none other than the violent spirit said to haunt the house. That night, things had already been strange, too. Claire said, "We'd seen marbles being thrown and we kept hearing taps and bangs," end quote. It was around 11 p.m. Most of the team had left and she went into the kitchen alone. "I heard a tap in the hallway at the bottom of the stairs. I took a photo, but I couldn't see anything," she explained. But once she reviewed the image, she noticed the arm. The arm you can see in the photo is not a solid form. It looks like mist. Now, it's kinda hard to tell here, but in the photo, you will notice a mirror on the wall behind the supposed ghostly arm. Based on the position of the figure, you would expect to see a reflection if something was standing there, but there isn't, so that's kinda eerie too. The photo was later confirmed by the home's owner, Bill Bungay, as the most compelling image of the Black Monk he'd ever seen. This isn't the only creepy picture taken in this notoriously haunted home, though. This is another eerie photo taken at 30 East Drive. Ghost hunter Pete Bolton captured what looks like a ghostly figure staring out from a mirror, right in the spot where the infamous Black Monk is said to appear, and the same spot the ghostly arm was photographed. Pete from Manchester took the photo during a ghost hunt and didn't realize what he'd caught until later. "I began taking photos like I usually do at a new location. I was snapping away at random at the house, not anything in particular," he said. One of the shots came out unusually dark, so Pete brightened it up on his computer, and that's when he noticed something strange. "I noticed there was a weird shape in the mirror. No one from the group was downstairs at the time, so it couldn't have been anyone from the group. What he saw was this ghoulish looking figure, clear enough that when he showed it to others without even saying anything, they saw what he did." Pete said at the time that he didn't claim it was proof of the paranormal, but he also didn't dismiss it outright. The mirror sits right near the stairs where a girl named Diane Pritchard, who used to live in the home, was reportedly dragged by some invisible force back in the 60s. In August of 1992, hotel workers in Pitlarky, Scotland were out hiking when they saw something hanging in the sky. It was a massive diamond-shaped object, completely silent, just floating there in the sky. Then a military jet flew by. One of the men had a camera and took 6 photos before the object shot off at high speed. They gave the pictures to the Daily Record newspaper, but the paper passed them straight to the Ministry of Defense. After that, the photos vanished. The public never saw them until 32 years later, when a retired Royal Air Force press officer named Craig Lindsay revealed that he'd kept a copy. It's a pretty amazing image, exactly as described. You see a metallic craft with a jet flying in the background. There were no signs of editing, no wires, nothing that screamed that it was fake. Nick Pope, who ran the UK's UFO desk at the Ministry of Defense, said this was one of the most compelling cases that he'd ever seen. The object didn't match any known military design. It could be a classified US aircraft, but if that's true, no one had ever come forward with proof. The original negatives are still missing. The Ministry of Defense's official files on the case were supposed to be released, but they extended the secrecy order until 2072. Reddit user Daddy Sprinkle shared this image here. Do you notice anything? Aside from the guy standing in the picture, obviously, there's a figure crouching in the grass behind the man. Thing is, nobody knows what this figure is. The Reddit user said the picture was taken by his father's girlfriend while they were hiking in the Rocky Mountains, Colorado. The image shows his dad standing outdoors, seemingly alone, but when they looked closer, they spotted the odd figure in the background. What's extra odd is how short the thing seems to be. I mean, the grass is not very tall. According to Daddy Sprinkle, no one was around when the photo was taken. His dad had just come from the area where the figure is, and he said that it was completely empty. His girlfriend also said she didn't see anyone standing behind him at the time. And if you think this is just some glitch of the camera, well, we do have some movement. This was a live iPhone photo, meaning it also captured a short video clip. Take a look at this. Now we see the thing slightly shifting from left to right. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but the figure does have a certain alien type quality about it, doesn't it? And it's the squatness of it. Kind of reminds me of E.T. On the night of February 24th to the 25th, 1942, Los Angeles went into full panic mode. Just a few months after Pearl Harbor, the US was on edge about a possible Japanese attack. When military spotters thought they saw an unidentified aircraft in the sky, the response was absolute chaos. The city went into blackout, air raid sirens screamed, and the US Army started blasting anti-aircraft rounds into the sky, over 1,400 shells to be exact. But what were they even shooting at? Well, the next morning, the Los Angeles Times published a now famous photo showing searchlights converging on what looked like some sort of solid object in the sky. Some claimed it was a weather balloon, others said it was just mass hysteria, but UFO theorists had another idea, one you can probably guess. Maybe they were shooting at an extraterrestrial craft. The military, of course, downplayed the whole thing though, first saying there was just an enemy plane, then saying there wasn't, then saying it was, a false alarm. But if nothing was there, why did trained military personnel keep firing for nearly an hour? To this day, nobody really knows what they were trying to hit, and that eerie photo keeps the speculation alive. Now, NASA doesn't usually like to admit when it alters images, but this one is hard to ignore. Back in 1976, during the Viking program, NASA's satellites snapped some of the clearest images of Mars yet. But according to some researchers, they also captured something they weren't supposed to, specifically a set of formations that strongly resembled the pyramids of Egypt. These supposed Martian pyramids were found in the Cydonia region, not far from the infamous face on Mars. For years, independent researchers have claimed that some of these pyramid-like structures appeared in early NASA images, but were later edited out, blurred, or conveniently classified. The idea, of course, being that NASA, or the powers controlling it, didn't want people asking too many questions about possible ancient civilizations on Mars. But NASA says there's nothing to see, just a case of pareidolia, our brains making patterns out of random shapes. But the thing is, NASA has confirmed that they do airbrush images when necessary, usually citing clarity issues. So what if the best evidence of artificial structures on Mars was erased before we ever got a chance to see it? Norway's Hasdalen Valley is the UFO hotspot that nobody really talks about, outside of Norway, that is. Starting in 1981 though, strange glowing lights started appearing in the sky, floating, zigzagging, sometimes shooting off at impossible speeds. Unlike most UFO cases, this wasn't a one-time thing either. These lights were consistent, sometimes appearing multiple times a week. And in 1981, one of the most famous photographs was taken, capturing a glowing orb hovering in the sky. The Hasdalen lights have been studied more than most UFO phenomena. Scientists have actually set up monitoring stations to track them, but still, nobody can agree on what they are. Some theories say it's some weird plasma reaction caused by the valley's unique geology, whatever the hell that means. Others think it could be some kind of military experiment. And of course, there's the idea that these are actual alien craft doing whatever it is aliens do, and yes, these lights still show up to this day. Even with all our modern technology though, nobody can fully explain what's going on in Hasdalen, and that 1981 photo remains one of the best pieces of evidence that something unusual is going on up there. In 1919, an old school Royal Air Force squadron lined up for a group photo at their base. Cute! But when the photo was developed, there was an extra face in the shot, one that shouldn't have been there. Smack in the middle of the back row, there's this guy who wasn't supposed to be there. Was it the janitor? No, it wasn't. This was a man who multiple men in the squadron swore was their old friend, Freddie Jackson. Problem is, Jackson had died just 2 days before this photograph was taken. And on top of that, his funeral had been held on the same day they snapped the picture. The theory is that Jackson, not realizing he was dead, showed up for the photo just like everyone else. Now, some say this is a case of double exposure, which was a common issue in old photography, but that sounds like a lame explanation to me. This is a pretty clear photograph. It's not like Freddy looks like this faint, ghostly figure. There's clearly a dude standing there. So, to this day, nobody's been able to debunk this one entirely. In December of 1964, French photographer Robert Laseric and his family reported encountering this massive tadpole-like creature in Stonehaven Bay in Hook Island, Australia. Laseric captured several photographs of this creature, which appeared to be up to 80 feet long. The images are pretty spooky, showing what looks like this dark, elongated thing resting on the seabed. Laseric claimed that as he approached the creature, it opened its mouth and moved toward him, causing him to make a quick getaway. Now, skeptics have tried to explain this one away, saying the supposed creature could have been a large mass of marine debris, a deflated skyhook balloon, or just an elaborate hoax, but what do you all think? When Apollo 11 first landed on the moon in 1969, the video that millions of people watched on TV was actually a degraded version. The original feed was in something called SSTV, slow scan television, which had way more detail, but it couldn't be broadcast directly. NASA converted it on the fly, and that's the grainy footage we all know. The originals, the clean tapes, were supposed to be stored for safekeeping, but they're gone. In 2006, NASA admitted they couldn't find them. Whole boxes of tapes just vanished. Officially, the explanation is that the reels were probably reused to save money, which is kind of insane when you think about it. This was humanity's first step on the moon, and somebody thought, you know, that's something we could just tape over. Seems kind of far-fetched. So some believe they weren't erased at all, that they were just locked away. I mean, the fact that the best, clearest look at Apollo 11 is missing or just not available to the public, well, it's no surprise it's led to some conspiracies. Back in 2001, a former Air Force sergeant named Carl Wolf went public at a disclosure project on UFOs, saying that in 1965, while working at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia with top secret clearance, he got pulled into something that he never expected. His usual job was fixing machines that processed surveillance photos from Vietnam, but one day he was sent over to a NASA facility on base to help with a problem involving images from the very first lunar orbiter mission. He described the place as this massive hangar filled with, quote, many foreign citizens in civilian clothes accompanied by interpreters. Then another airman casually told him, hey, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. Wolf said he was completely stunned and was like, who? Like, what do you mean? The guy then showed him a photo mosaic stitched together from the orbiter images, and Wolf swore that what he saw looked nothing like natural formations, saying there were spherical buildings. There were very tall towers and things that looked somewhat like radar dishes. He said he expected it to be huge news. Every day when I went home, I thought, I can't wait to hear about this on the news, he said. But the news never came, and decades later, he finally went public with what he saw. Wolf died in 2018 after a bicycle accident. Some said his death was suspicious, but I don't know. I mean, why kill the guy over 2 decades after coming out? But what do you all think? Well, here's a photo I'm sure NASA would love to be scrubbed from the internet. You may not know it, but pictured here are a bunch of rocket scientists, some of which were former members of the Third Reich. After World War II, the US quietly launched something called Operation Paperclip, and it set the stage for the entire space program. Basically, over 1,600 scientists and engineers from Germany were brought into America under the radar. At the time, the public had no idea this was happening. But these were the men who'd been building advanced rockets during the war, and suddenly they were working for the US military and later NASA. The most famous one was Wernher von Braun. He ended up becoming the chief architect of the Saturn V rocket, the one that took Apollo astronauts to the moon. The whole thing was done in secrecy, and documents about it were buried for years. When you put that next to claims like Carl Wolf's, I mean, I don't know, if the government was willing to cover up who was building the rockets in the first place, kinda makes sense to wonder what else they were keeping quiet once we started getting photos back from the moon. Before Apollo, NASA sent lunar orbiter probes in the 60s to scout landing sites. These things snapped high-res photos of the moon, but the actual images were never fully released to the public. Instead, what most people saw were grainy prints. The high-quality scans were sitting on magnetic tapes gathering dust. For decades, NASA didn't bother with them. They were basically forgotten, until a group of space enthusiasts came across the tapes and the old machines needed to read them. This became known as the LOIRP project, or Lunar Orbiter Image Recovery Project. It was made up of this ragtag crew working out of an abandoned McDonald's near NASA Ames Research Center in California. They tracked down vintage tape drives, got them working again, and pulled stunning, crisp photos off the tapes, way clearer than anything NASA had ever shown. It left a lot of people wondering, well, why NASA never pushed this stuff out themselves? Was it just laziness, bureaucracy, or did they not want everything on those tapes to be seen? Whatever the case may be, if not for those fans, these photos probably would have been lost forever. Paul and Evelyn Trent lived in a small farm just outside McKinville, Oregon. One evening in May of 1950, Evelyn saw something shiny in the sky and called out to Paul. He grabbed his camera and took 2 photos of what looked like a metallic disc flying through the air. A few weeks later, their local newspaper ran the photos, and then Life magazine picked them up. From there, it became one of the most talked about UFO sightings in the United States. Kodak analysts checked the negatives and found no signs they'd been tampered with. And remember, these were the days long before digital editing was even a thing. The lighting and shadows were also consistent with the time of day the Trents claimed to have taken them. Skeptics have tried for decades to explain this away, saying it might have been a thrown pie tin or a model on a string, but no one's ever recreated the photos in a convincing way. The Trents didn't profit from the attention either, and they never changed their story. Even into old age, they stuck to what they said they saw. Notice anything strange about this image? What if we zoom in a little? Well, that's strange, isn't it? Reddit user solid_ace6 shared this image, saying that the photo comes straight from NASA's own website. It was taken long before things like Starlink satellites were even around. Clearly, we can see 5 silvery, circular-shaped objects lined up in space just beyond Earth. Judging by how big they look next to the planet, whatever they are, they're pretty big too. So what are these things? I have no idea. I can't find any info on this image beyond this post. So what do you all think? Share your thoughts down below. Starting in the early 80s, people living in the Hasdalen Valley in central Norway began reporting strange lights in the sky. They were glowing orbs, sometimes white, sometimes yellow or red, and they'd hover, shoot across the valley, or slowly drift along the mountains. They'd appear randomly, day or night, and sometimes stick around for over an hour. Locals saw them so often that people actually stopped thinking it was weird at all. It just became part of the landscape. Scientists got involved in 1983 when a group of researchers from Oxford University set up a project aptly named Project Hasdalen. They brought in proper gear, cameras, radar, and electromagnetic sensors, and they did catch the lights. What they found was that the lights didn't behave like any known aircraft or natural weather phenomena. Some would split in two or suddenly disappear, others would shoot upward at impossible speeds. The radar showed solid objects too, not just energy or reflections. They also analyzed the area and found elevated levels of rare elements like scandium, which isn't usually found there. Some theories say the lights are plasma, caused by maybe a rare reaction between the minerals in the valley and underground water, but they can't fully explain why this seems to only happen in this part of the world. The lights are still being seen today, not as often as they were in the 80s, but still seen. There's a permanent observatory in the valley now, running 24/7, but after over 4 decades, nobody has a clear answer. In late August of 1951, 3 science professors from Texas Tech, Dr. W.L. Ducker, Dr. A.G. Oberg, and Dr. W.I. Robinson, were sitting outside one evening when they saw this string of glowing lights flying across the sky in a tight V shape. The lights were bluish-white, totally silent, and moving very fast. The formation looked too precise to be birds, and a few days later, 18-year-old Carl Hart Jr., a student at the college, managed to take 5 photos of these lights. His pictures were sent to the Air Force and eventually became part of Project Blue Book. They didn't dismiss the case, but their best guess was that it might have been birds reflecting streetlights, but even they admitted Hart's photos didn't match that theory. They couldn't reproduce the effect. People kept seeing the lights for weeks. They always moved in formation. Multiple witnesses described the same kind of motion. The professors gave statements and held on to their version of events. None of them changed their story. The Air Force never reached a solid conclusion, and it's one of the few cases from that era they left open. In 1969, reports started coming out about a supposed UFO crash in Russia, and this footage here was used in news reports at the time. Here we can see what is allegedly KGB and military personnel inspecting a disc-shaped object at a crash site. These images were later featured in the secret KGB UFO files, a documentary that brought a lot of attention to this incident. Some think that this footage and photographs are evidence of a genuine UFO, that the Soviet government recovered a crashed alien spacecraft. But it's never been proven. There's no definitive documentation of this case, so some think the whole thing was just a hoax. And yeah, it's hard to find solid information on this incident, but for some, that just makes the whole thing more believable. The Soviets weren't really known for being transparent about these things, and it's not hard to imagine they'd want to cover something like this up. To date though, no conclusive evidence has confirmed the authenticity of this footage or the photos. Is this a hoax, or are these images real, but were just suppressed? In 2017, a photograph started getting shared around that some believe showed Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, on a dock in the Marshall Islands after their disappearance in 1937. The image found in the US National Archives is supposedly a piece of proof that Earhart and Noonan survived a crash landing and were then taken captive by the Japanese military. Sean Henry, a former executive assistant director for the FBI, has analyzed the image and confirmed that it hasn't been altered or tampered with in any way. Earhart disappeared on July 2nd of 1937 during her attempt to fly around the world. 2 years later, she was officially declared dead. They figured her plane crashed somewhere in the Pacific, but if this photo is legit, it could mean she survived, at least for a while. The woman in the image does kind of look like Earhart, although it is a bit grainy and shot from a distance, and the man has a receding hairline, similar facial features to Noonan. I could see it. In the background, there's also a Japanese ship, the Koshu, towing a barge that happens to be about the same length as Earhart's plane. During NASA's Apollo 17 mission in 1972, astronauts snapped a bunch of photos while exploring the moon. One of those pictures, known as AS17135-20-680, has caught a lot of attention because it seems to show a pyramid-shaped structure on the lunar surface. But what makes it even more suspicious is that NASA later blurred or altered the image in official archives. This has led some to believe they were trying to cover something up, that maybe this image is proof that they found something up there. Others argue it's just a natural rock formation, and what looks like a pyramid is really just the way the light and shadows hit the surface. You know the deal. NASA hasn't officially explained what's in the photo, which is only added fuel to the fire, at least online. Without a clear answer, people have come up with all kinds of theories, ranging from secret space programs to lost alien ruins. Whatever the truth is, the image is still one of the more mysterious photos taken during the Apollo missions, and to this day, it still has people debating what's really up there. On November 22nd, 1963, during the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in Dallas, Texas, numerous photographs and films were taken by spectators. Well, someone showed up in some of these photos and footage, a mysterious figure who would later be dubbed the Babushka Lady. She wore a headscarf and was standing in a pretty prime spot where she would have seen everything go down. But alright, whatever, lots of people were there. Obviously they're gonna be captured on camera. Well, what makes the Babushka Lady so interesting is that she's holding what looks like a camera, meaning she might have captured one of the clearest angles of the incident. Thing is, no nobody knows who she was, and whatever footage she might have taken has never been found. The FBI even put out calls for her to come forward, but she never did. Some people think she was just a random bystander, but others actually think she may have had a reason for staying quiet. JFK conspiracies are a rabbit hole, but there are some that say the CIA wanted him dead, and if that's the case, they wouldn't have wanted any images leaking that could potentially incriminate them. Maybe the babushka lady and her photos were found, if you know what I mean. Either way, she's still one of the biggest unanswered questions from that day. The Black Knight satellite is a term used to describe a mysterious object believed by some to be an extraterrestrial satellite orbiting Earth. The legend dates back to 1899, when inventor Nikola Tesla reported receiving these unusual radio signals, which he speculated could have been coming from some kind of intelligent source. In 1954, newspapers reported claims by UFO researcher Donald Keyhoe that the US Air Force had detected 2 satellites orbiting Earth, at a time when no known satellites had been launched. Then in 1998, during the STS-88 mission, NASA's first space shuttle mission to the International Space Station, astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour snapped this incredible photo. What we see here is this strange object in orbit, which some claimed to be photographic evidence of the legendary Black Knight satellite. NASA later came out and said that the object was a thermal blanket lost during a spacewalk, but even still, the Black Knight satellite is a popular conspiracy, and some are still adamant that there's some ancient alien probe monitoring Earth floating around up there, watching our every move. What we're showing here are some of the only images ever taken inside Kamsusan Palace of the Sun in North Korea. This is the mausoleum where Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il are preserved in glass coffins. As you can imagine, the whole place is under extremely tight control by the government, and forget about taking photos. Cameras are completely banned, so anything you see from inside is super rare. The few images that have leaked are mostly from the 90s and not the best quality. This creepy looking fence is known as the Gate of Hell, the only thing standing between the people of Hacienda Heights, California and whatever's hidden behind it, and story goes it's not good. The property behind this fence has been abandoned for decades. Back in the 40s, there was supposedly a sanatorium here, and the rumor is it got shut down because of malpractice. But that's not the only story. Some say the building beyond the fence was home to Satan worshippers, with all kinds of dark rituals happening behind closed doors. Gossip really took off because of the back entrance. A few people who snuck a peek claim to have seen pentagrams and cult symbols scrawled all over the walls, and if you catch a glimpse through the windows, some swear they've seen red stains on the floors. Nobody can say for sure. The fence definitely has a vibe about it. Makes you wonder if it's keeping people out or something in. This creepy looking place sits on an island called Ano Nuevo. You'll notice with a lot of these pictures, they're taken from the mainland. That's because this island is completely off limits. This is a tiny island between San Francisco and Santa Cruz. It's one of the most important breeding spots for northern elephant seals and the endangered Steller's sea lions. And because there are so many seals and sea lions hanging out, great white sharks are often spotted in the waters nearby too. It's part of the Ano Nuevo State Reserve. The surrounding waters are included in 2 marine conservation areas. Geologically, the island hasn't always been an island. Back in the 1700s, it was actually part of the mainland, and over time, a channel formed and separated it. People cannot just visit here. Access is strictly limited to research teams approved by the University of California, which manages the island with the State Parks Department. There are a few abandoned buildings from the late 1800s, like a foghorn station and a residence and an old lighthouse tower that was knocked down because it was falling apart and threatening the wildlife. Some of the remaining buildings are still used for research, but other than that, the island is just completely off limits to the public. In the suburb of Downey in LA, there's a group of old buildings that have been abandoned for years. The sidewalks are cracked with weeds growing through them, and banana trees have grown as tall as the roofs. The windows and doors are all boarded up. This used to be the Los Alamos County Poor Farm. The farm opened in 1887. The county bought 124 acres to create a place for people who were poor, elderly, or disabled. Residents worked on the farm, growing fruits and vegetables, raising cows, pigs, and chickens. The food, of course, helped feed everyone, and any extra was then sold to make money. The first people moved in 1888, and Dr. Edwin Burdick, a doctor with a farming background, ran the place. Over time, the farm expanded. By 1910, it covered about 400 acres. Life wasn't always idyllic, though. Residents weren't always treated well, and there were plenty of cases of people taking their own lives. In 1915, a new superintendent, William Rudy Harriman, took over. He renamed the farm Hondo and started calling everyone patients instead of inmates. The number of people living there grew, reaching nearly 2,000 during the Great Depression. A tent city was added to accommodate everyone. In 1932, the focus shifted to medical care and rehabilitation, and the name changed to Rancho Los Amigos. By the 50s, it had become a full hospital, and the farming part was no longer used. The old buildings were abandoned in the 80s, and they've sat abandoned and off-limits ever since. Pictured here is, of course, John Lennon signing a book for a fan, Mark Chapman, who's standing in the background. That same man would end John Lennon's life just hours later. The photo was snapped on December 8, 1980, outside the Dakota apartment in New York where Lennon and Yoko Ono lived. Chapman had a firearm in his pocket when the photo was taken, but he couldn't go through with it right away. He'd been waiting outside the Dakota all afternoon, watching, getting his nerves up. After the signing, he spent the next several hours on the sidewalk reading The Catcher in the Rye, the book he was obsessed with, preparing himself for what he called his statement. Chapman's obsession with Lennon had been building for months. He idolized him, but he'd turned on Lennon after becoming a born-again Christian. Suddenly, he was convinced Lennon was a phony, preaching peace while being rich and out of touch. And that meant, in his eyes, that John Lennon had to die. For some reason, he thought killing Lennon would give his life meaning. At 10:49 p.m., Lennon and Ono returned to the Dakota, where Chapman was waiting. He fired 5 rounds, hitting Lennon 4 times in the back and shoulder. This next photo was taken by a woman named Denise Russell. Pictured here is her grandmother, who lived on her own until she was 94, when her health started to decline and she had to move into an assisted living home. At the end of her first week there, the facility held a picnic for residents and their families. Denise's mother and sister were there, and her sister took a couple of pictures that day. One of those photos, taken on Sunday, August 17, 1997, shows her grandmother sitting at the picnic. It looks like a pretty ordinary family photo. Nobody noticed anything unusual at the time. It wasn't until Christmas Day in 2000, after her grandmother had passed away, that someone spotted something. While browsing through loose family photos at her parents' house, Denise's sister handed her the picture and asked who she thought the man behind her grandmother looked like. It took a few seconds for it to sink in. The man standing behind her grandmother appeared to be her grandfather, who died back in 1984, 13 years before this photo was taken. A now deleted Reddit user posted this next image with a caption reading, "A few years ago, an older family member of mine went on one of her regular hikes. The trail she takes runs through a fairly remote area on the side of a mountain with no buildings nearby and very few people ever around. She took some photos and later posted a few of them on Facebook, as older people tend to do. Everything seemed normal at first, but then people started commenting on one of the images, asking who she was walking with, but she insisted that she'd been entirely alone. She looked at the photo again, and that's when she noticed it, a figure in the distance. Now, looking at this image, you do see what looks like a figure standing in the bottom right corner, but it's so far away and hard to make out, there's nothing all that unsettling about it. But zooming in, and that hazy looking figure turns out to be a lot more ghoulish. Pale gray skin, its eyes and mouth pure black. Just who or what exactly is that thing? This image was shared by the Zom Behind You on Reddit. He'd been finishing up his shift at Target when he snapped this picture. Being dark and empty, the store had a bit of a liminal space kind of vibe. I guess that's why he wanted to capture it on camera. After taking the photo, the Redditor and his manager started walking out of the store, and they heard a sound they'd never heard before. At first he thought it might be an alarm, but it didn't really sound like one. It was closer to the sound of a phone ringing. Around the same time, the self-checkout light turned on by itself. Both of them were pretty shaken up at that point, and they left right away. When they looked at the photo later, they also spotted the shadowy figure standing in the middle of the aisle there. They hadn't seen anything there initially. Another deleted Reddit user posted these two images. One zoomed into the china cabinet in the background. That reflection in the glass isn't the person who took the picture. The Reddit user said that during the pandemic, she stayed at her aunt's house along with her brother, his girlfriend, and the girlfriend's daughter. She said she'd never experienced anything clearly paranormal in that house or anywhere else in her life. She wasn't a hardcore skeptic, but she didn't really have any reason to believe in the paranormal either. But she said her mother, sister, and her brother's girlfriend all claimed to have strange experiences over the years, both in that house and in her parents' old home. While she hadn't seen apparitions herself, she did say she'd experienced things that were hard to explain. Well, this photo was taken in a room near the main stairwell. Her brother's girlfriend and her daughter snapped it before leaving the house. When they took a look at the photo later, they noticed what looked like a person's reflection in the glass of the china cabinet. Nobody recognized who it was, and nobody had been standing where their reflection would show up in the glass like that. Morgan Island down in Beaufort County, South Carolina is a pretty unusual place. Most people know it by its nickname, Monkey Island, because it is home to a huge population of rhesus macaques. There are a few thousand of them there, freely roaming around. And how they get there? In the late 70s and early 80s, around 1,400 of them were moved there from a research center in Puerto Rico. Since then, the population has grown, and the island ended up becoming one of the largest colonies of rhesus macaques outside of their natural habitat. The island is owned by the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, but the monkey colony is managed by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Because of that, it isn't open to the public. You can go near it by boat, but nobody's allowed to actually step onto the island unless they're part of an authorized research team. And speaking of research, a portion of the monkeys, usually a few hundred a year, are captured and taken off the island to be used in labs. Yeah, sorry, had to be a dark side to this one too. In 1929, a huge landslide hit San Pedro, California, and several wooden homes slid straight into the ocean. At its worst, the ground was moving about 11 inches a day. The landslide swallowed houses, sidewalks, rail tracks, and the street itself. Homes that weren't destroyed were moved to other parts of town, and the remains were torn down. Today, the area is known as Sunken City. It's been posted as no trespassing for decades, but people still go here. Trespassers can be hit with fines and any cars are towed. The terrain is very unstable, and the LA Fire Department has to rescue people from here almost every week. It is not a safe place to explore. This is the old Inunaki Tunnel in Japan. It was built in 1949. Over the years, it picked up a reputation. There were a lot of violent crimes here and a number of deaths. It got such a bad name that the tunnel was eventually closed off completely. And once that happened, the rumors about a village you can't enter started to spread. People began to tell stories of odd sounds coming from deep in the closed off tunnel. Then people started talking about Inunaki Village, hidden out in the woods, said to be this tiny village of only a few people who want nothing to do with the rest of Japan. Hostile, living by their own rules, snatching up anyone who wanders too close. One of the most well-known stories goes back to the early 70s. A couple's car had broken down on a back road, and while trying to find help, they ended up walking into what looked like some abandoned village. Everything was quiet until an older man stepped out of one of the houses. In the legend, he tells them they've reached Inunaki and then attacks them with a sickle. These are photos from Hashima Island, also known as Gunkajima or Battleship Island. It sits off the coast of Nagasaki. From the late 1800s until 1974, it was a coal mining town run by Mitsubishi. At its peak, thousands of miners and their families lived here. Concrete apartment blocks, a school, hospital, community hall. It was a condensed, self-contained city built right on a tiny island. But when coal became less valuable and the mines dried up, Mitsubishi shut everything down in 1974. Everyone left almost overnight. For decades, the island was off limits, but in 2009, parts of it were opened for tours, but there are still lots of buildings that are just too dangerous to explore. Next up is Nichitsu, which most people call Nichitsu Ghost Town. It sits deep in the mountains of Saitama, Japan. It used to be a tin mining town. The workers and their families lived right on site because the nearest cities were a long drive away. But sometime in the 80s, everyone left. There isn't one clear explanation for why. With mining towns, it's usually something practical, like the ore running out, the company shutting down, but there's no story of that happening. Whatever the reason though, the population dropped to zero and the buildings were just left as is. What people talk about the most now is the abandoned hospital, because that's where a lot of strange stories come from. All your typical ghostly fare, but there's also a doctor's office inside that still has actual medical specimens the staff never removed when the place closed, like preserved organs sitting in jars. There used to be a jar with a human brain too, but somebody took that one home with them. The rest of the town is still standing. It's just very worn down. Old houses with their furniture still in place, classrooms with books on the shelves. The usual frozen in time feeling you get in abandoned towns. There aren't many photos taken on this island, and reading this sign becomes very clear why. Gruinard is a small, windy Scottish island about 1 kilometer off the mainland. During World War II, Britain used it to test biological weapons, specifically anthrax. They released the spores there, and sheep were placed on the island. Just days after being exposed, the sheep got sick and died, surprise, surprise, proving the weapon was lethal. The government tried to contain it by burying or burning the infected animals, but the anthrax spores were not that easy to get rid of. Because of the contamination, Gruinard was quarantined for decades. In the 80s, activists calling themselves the Dark Harvest Commandos threatened to spread a bunch of contaminated soil unless the government cleaned it. So in response, scientists sprayed tons of diluted formaldehyde over the island and removed the worst topsoil. In 1990, it was officially declared the island was safe again, but people still don't really go here. Wonder why. In the late 90s, NASA built a satellite called Discover, originally nicknamed GoreSat because Al Gore pushed for it. The whole idea was simple, but kind of amazing. Put a camera 1 million miles out in space at a fixed point so it could constantly take full disk images of Earth. I mean, think about that, 24/7 live pictures of our entire planet. But right before launch, the project was shelved. For over a decade, the satellite just sat in storage. Officially, budget cuts and politics killed it, but plenty of people suspected something else, like maybe NASA or the government didn't actually want a permanent eye on the planet. After all, a camera like that could capture strange anomalies in the atmosphere, unusual lights, or unidentified objects crossing near the planet. The satellite eventually did launch in 2015, but by then the hype had kind of faded, and the release of its images was more low-key. You'd think people would be fascinated by daily Earth portraits from space, but most don't even know the Discover satellite exists. The fact it was built in 1998 and then quietly buried in a warehouse for years does raise some questions. Was it politics? Was someone nervous about what a non-stop Earth camera might reveal? In 2000, NASA launched the IMAGE satellite to study Earth's magnetosphere, the invisible bubble of charged particles surrounding our planet. It was a big deal for space science, and for 7 years it worked perfectly, sending back tons of data about solar storms and auroras. Then in 2005, just as it was hitting its stride, NASA lost contact with it. For nearly a decade, people assumed that it was just dead, faded into obscurity. But in 2018, amateur satellite watchers spotted a signal. Turns out IMAGE had somehow powered back up on its own, orbiting quietly for 13 years. NASA quickly swooped in and re-established contact. The weird thing, for all that time, the satellite had been drifting in space, still recording data. Some NASA engineers joked that IMAGE was like the ultimate lost and found satellite. But conspiracy theorists have had a field day with this. Why did it suddenly reconnect? Was it a glitch, or was something in its orbit triggering it? In March of 2020, a Reddit user spotted what looks like a perfectly smooth, pale white tic-tac shaped object on Mars. The post claimed, a tic-tac has been spotted on Mars by the Mars Curiosity rover's mast cams. Check out how it's casting a shadow on the surface. The shape is pretty clean, and it's very egg-like. And some viewers immediately compared it to the infamous tic-tac UFO sightings reported by US Navy pilots. One Redditor wrote, "If it is there, we either get high-res images of an alien craft or the weirdest rock formation in the solar system. Someone tell NASA to get back out there." Others were more skeptical, pointing out it could just be, a smooth rock. Still, that shadow under it really does make it look like it's floating. Pilots like David Fravor described encounters with, quote, solid white smooth with no edges uniformly colored craft. So could what we're looking at here be one of those now infamous Tic Tac UAPs. Hubble's been snapping incredible images of space since 1990, but some of its photos have quietly disappeared from NASA's archives and no one really explained why. A few of these images had tiny lights or objects, and what's extra weird is that some showed up in the same spot across multiple photos. NASA says it's probably just cosmic rays hitting the sensors, basically random glitches, but when the same glitch keeps popping up in a series of images, it does seem odd. Amateur astronomers who downloaded the early images noticed entire frames from those sequences were missing later on. The raw data still exists, but only some of it was re-released publicly, so there are gaps people can't easily explain. When people talk about NASA sitting on strange photos, the Saturn hexagon isn't mentioned much, but this is a pretty interesting story. So back in 1980 and 81, both Voyager probes snapped pictures of this massive, perfectly shaped hexagon storm spinning on Saturn's North Pole. And when I say massive, I mean each side of the thing is bigger than Earth's diameter. It's one of the most unnatural looking natural phenomena in our solar system, a six-sided cloud formation rotating around like it was engineered. But oddly, NASA never really hyped those photos back then. They existed, but most people had no clue. The story didn't blow up until the Cassini spacecraft arrived in 2004 and started sending back images. Suddenly, the public was seeing this perfect hexagon in full detail, and people started asking why they'd never heard about it before. That's when the accusations started, that NASA had quietly buried some of the strangest space photos ever taken, only bringing them out when Cassini made it impossible to ignore. Now, as for why they do that, your guess is as good as mine. This is one of the strangest NASA cover-up stories out there. Mona Lisa is what some people claim to be a mummified alien body discovered on the moon. The whole story ties back to Apollo 20, which supposedly happened in the late 70s after NASA had already shut down the Apollo program officially. According to the theory, this was a secret mission that found something massive on the far side of the moon, a crashed spacecraft. And inside that ship was a body. She was described as looking human, but not quite. She had 6 fingers, an odd ridge down her forehead, and large, lifeless eyes, because she was dead. The crew nicknamed her the Mona Lisa. The claim comes from William Rutledge, who says he was part of the Apollo 20 crew. In 2007, he posted grainy footage online showing what looks like a mummified figure strapped into some kind of cockpit. NASA's official stance is that Apollo 20 never happened, but for some, this is just another thing NASA has tried to cover up. Up next, we have the Blackpool Beach entity. This has become a pretty notorious image online, shared by Tiny Professor 9680 on Reddit. It shows 2 brothers hanging out at Blackpool Beach in Lancashire, England. Tiny Professor posted the picture about 9 months back, but his friend had shown them the photo, which was taken in 2016. Now, you may be wondering, well, what's so special about this picture? Looks pretty mundane. Well, look between their legs. A ghastly looking face looks to be poking out between them. It has a sickly greenish complexion with yellow eyes. Not what you'd ever want to see crawling around the boardwalk at the beach. The picture was taken by the boy's mother, and they were all adamant that there was nobody else with them at the time. By the way, I don't know, am I the only one who kind of thinks this looks like a zombified version of Miley Cyrus? Rajiv Gandhi had been Prime Minister of India from 1984 to 1989. And on the night of May 21st, 1991, he was campaigning ahead of the general election. The picture you're looking at here was taken at his last public appearance. At 10:10 p.m., a press photographer named Haru Babu took what would become the final photographs of Gandhi. In the images, Gandhi appeared relaxed, smiling, greeting people, not knowing what happened seconds later. You wouldn't think much of these images. But standing amongst the crowd, captured on camera, was the woman who was about to take his life, as well as several others in the crowd. The woman was later identified as 22-year-old Kalivani Rajaratnam, a member of the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, or the Tamil Tigers, a militant group from Sri Lanka known for the type of attacks that were about to be carried out on this day. Rajaratnam approached Gandhi, bending down to touch his feet, a traditional gesture of respect, but unbeknownst to everyone in the crowd, hidden under her dress were explosives. When she detonated the device, the blast killed Rajiv Gandhi, the photographer, and at least 14 others instantly. Here we see a group of friends lying on some grass, waving drinks, just enjoying themselves, but When you look closer, some people notice something strange. In the window of the house directly behind them, there appears to be a ghostly figure, possibly holding a baby, leering out at them. The picture was taken in a small town called Wem, and that abandoned house is pretty famous, or rather infamous, for its ghostly activity. The photo was taken by Natasha Oliver in 2010. It was after a World Cup match. Someone realized there was a weird figure in one of the photos, and we thought it was kind of freaky, Natasha said. She later posted the image to Facebook, and then it started circulating online, but this is not the only ghostly image taken in the town of Wem. This is one of the most infamous pieces of ghost photography in history. In 1995, amateur photographer Tony O'Reilly was documenting a fire that had broken out at Wem Town Hall. When he developed the pictures, one of them appeared to show a young girl in an old-timey dress lurking in the doorway of the burning building, staring straight into the camera. O'Reilly insisted he hadn't doctored the photo, and a lot of people became convinced that the figure was the ghost of a girl named Jane Churm. The story goes that Jane had accidentally started a fire in 1677 by dropping a candle, which nearly destroyed the entire town. The photograph got a lot of attention, and it boosted tourism too. Suddenly people were flocking to town. Bakeries started selling ghost-shaped cakes, and the town even added a note to the road sign calling it Ghost Town. But in 2010, a local Wem man noticed that the ghostly girl had an uncanny resemblance to a girl in a 1922 postcard. So had O'Reilly actually tampered with the photo after all? Maybe. Maybe not though. The legend hasn't completely gone away. Tony O'Reilly passed away suddenly in 2005, never having admitted that his ghost photo was a hoax. This photo was taken on a street in Reykjavik, Iceland in 1943, right in the middle of World War II during the Allied occupation. The streets are full of American soldiers, British sailors, civilians, all dressed in typical clothing of that time. It's the kind of photo you'd see in a history textbook. But look at the image long enough, and there's one guy who stands out. He's in the background, looking right into the camera with his hand raised, pressing something tight against the side of his ear. Yes, it looks like he's talking on a phone, and once you notice it, it's pretty hard to unsee. In 1943, people didn't even have cordless phones at home. Everything was wired. Is it possible he's just scratching his ear, shielding himself from the wind? I mean, sure, but if you were to Photoshop a man talking on a cell phone into a historical scene, it's pretty much what it would look like. And then, well, Photoshop. Now I sound like I'm in the wrong time period. You type in a man talking on a cell phone, 1943, into some AI, and it would generate the image for you. This one's weird because it actually involves official documents and a real missing persons case. In 2006, a man named Sergei Ponomarenko was walking the streets of Kyiv, Ukraine. People noticed him right away. He's wearing vintage 1950s style clothing. He was also disoriented and confused. He ended up at the police station. Claimed he was born in 1932. He had documents with him as well, a Soviet-era ID card dated to the 50s that looked pretty authentic to the time period. He was also carrying an antique camera, and when police developed the film inside, they found photos of the city as it would have looked in the 50s. The architecture, the cars, the clothing of people in the background, everything matched that period. One of the images was of a woman Sergei said was his fiancée. Police managed to track her down. They found that she was real, now in her 70s, and she also told police a pretty odd story, that her fiancé Sergei had vanished out of nowhere decades ago. He then showed them a photograph of who she said was Sergei, except this one was supposedly taken in the year 2050. He was an older man standing against what looked like a futuristic city skyline. But before police could dig any further into all this, Sergei Ponomarenko went missing from the observation room where he was being held. A man named John Titor showed up online in 2000, posting on random forums and message boards. He said he was a soldier from the year 2036 on a mission to go back to 1975 and grab an old IBM 5100 computer. He claimed that machine was needed to fix future computer problems that modern systems just couldn't handle. He also posted these grainy photographs of what he said was his time machine. Big, clunky setup, supposedly fit into the back of a 1960s Chevy Corvette. The pictures showed a mess of wires, panels, one main piece he called the temporal displacement unit. He also wrote these long, detailed explanations about how all this stuff worked, throwing around physics talk and stuff about, of course, time travel. Made a bunch of predictions about the future too. Most of those predictions, like a American Civil War, that never happened. But to this day, the amount of detail in his posts and those weird photos, it makes this a pretty intriguing case. And nobody knows who John Titor really was. Photos are the only physical thing anything linked to him. And of course, we have what's been dubbed the time-traveling hipster. This photo was taken in November 1941 at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in Gold Bridge, British Columbia. It's a genuine archive photo, well documented, it's authenticated, everyone is dressed exactly like you'd expect for the early 40s, suits, vests, fedoras, but then there's this one guy on the right side of the image. He stands out so much, actually jarring when you first notice him. He's wearing a modern-looking sweater with a t-shirt underneath that looks to have some kind of logo. It's like a graphic tee that you'd see today. His hair also doesn't really look like the neat, slick-back styles most men were wearing back then. He's wearing what looked like sunglasses. Those types of sunglasses, the style, the size, wasn't really popular until decades later. He's also carrying something in his hands. Looks like a small handheld camera, maybe. It looks completely out of place. Now, technically, all the individual parts of his outfit, the sweater style, that type of sunglasses, even compact cameras did exist in the 40s, but they weren't common, and seeing all of this stuff combined on one single person really does create what we now call the hipster aesthetic. This photo was taken just after the liberation of France in World War II. The woman in the picture is Simone Toussaint being paraded through the streets of Chartres, France. Her head had been shaved, her clothes were torn, and a mark had been branded on her forehead. She's holding her infant, who is fathered by a German soldier. This was not rare. Scenes like this happened across France during what was called the Wild Purge. Thousands of women were accused and punished for sleeping with the enemy. There were no trials, it was really just mob justice, and in many cases, women weren't even collaborating. Some were just accused. Others worked as like maids for them, or had been victims of SA at the hands of German soldiers, but that didn't matter. Crowds gathered, cheered, and sometimes jeered as these women were marched through towns, sometimes barefoot, bleeding and crying. And this was seen as justice at the time, but it was really more like revenge theater. After the US dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, the heat blast was so intense it bleached surfaces. Anything that blocked the light, including human bodies, they left a sort of reverse shadow behind. One of the most haunting examples is known as the human shadow etched in stone. It's the outline of a person who'd been sitting on the steps outside the Sumitomo Bank when the bomb went off. The heat instantly vaporized them, leaving behind a scorched imprint of their body on the steps. The image was captured in photographs taken later by Japanese and American teams documenting the aftermath. The stone itself was eventually moved to the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Museum. People sometimes assume this was a literal burn mark from the body, but it's actually the unbleached area, again, where their body blocked the flash. This photograph shows a hospital ward packed wall to wall with children lying in iron lungs, which were these giant steel machines that kept them alive during the worst of the polio epidemic. In the 40s and 50s, polio was one of the most feared diseases in the world, and it mostly hit young people. It could paralyze muscles, including the diaphragm, meaning you couldn't breathe on your own, so the iron lung worked by creating negative pressure to force your chest to rise and fall. Once you were in, you stayed in. Some patients spent weeks or months inside, others spent their whole lives in one. In the photo, you can see the small round mirrors above the patients' heads, angled so they could look around. That was really their only view of the world. What a complete and utter nightmare, especially if you're claustrophobic. The last man to live in an iron lung was Paul Alexander, who died in 2024. He spent the majority of his life in one, but was actually able to become a lawyer and author, all while confined into this metal tube. In the middle of a civil rights protest at the Manson Motor Lodge in St. Augustine, Florida, a group of black and white activists jumped into the motel's segregated swimming pool to protest. What happened next was caught on camera. James Brock, the motel manager, walked over with this jug of muriatic acid, basically industrial strength cleaner, and he started dumping it into the water while people were still swimming. A photographer captured the exact moment he poured the acid, standing over the pool with his jaw clenched. Some of the swimmers scream in panic, unsure of what's happening. At the same time, a white police officer is in the water dragging one of the protesters out by the neck with a billy club. The photo may look staged to some view, but it wasn't. This really happened, and it was broadcast all over the country. Brock later claimed the acid was just to clean the pool, but yeah, it obviously wasn't the case. The image became one of the most graphic examples of how far some were willing to go to keep things segregated. And no, he wasn't charged. What exactly are these things? Deep under the Larsen ice shelf, there's a hidden world no one had ever seen before. Researchers drilled roughly 1,640 feet straight down through the ice to reach an underground river, and when they finally dropped a camera into the water, the first thing they noticed was movement. Hundreds of tiny shrimp-like creatures swarming the lens. Craig Stevens, an oceanographer at New Zealand's National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research, said it left the team, quote, jumping up and down for joy. And that, quote, having all those animals swimming around our camera means there's clearly an important ecosystem process happening there, end quote. The cavern was unlike anything they expected. Instead of a smooth, flat roof, the ceiling was jagged and uneven. Stevens described it like a loaf of bread with a bulge at the top and narrow slope at the bottom. And the water below didn't just flow in one direction. It split into 4 or 5 distinct layers, moving in opposite directions. Something that Stevens said, quote, changes our current understanding and models of these environments. These images were captured at a lake in Antarctica. They may not look like much, but let's dive in, shall we? Lake Enigma sits deep under Antarctic ice. You'd think it would be frozen solid, but when researchers drilled through nearly 40 feet of ice, they found a hidden layer of liquid water and, more importantly, life. The team lowered a camera into the lake and saw there were microorganisms covering the bottom. Some looked like spiky things, others like crumpled carpets or tiny tree-like structures over a foot high. It was life where no one was expecting to find it. The water isn't just trapped up there, it's being fed by the nearby amorphous glacier through some kind of underground channel. But this part of Antarctica is brutal. The constant howling winds and non-stop evaporation should have dried up anything like this ages ago. Obviously, that isn't the case though. Among the tiny organisms was, I'll try and pronounce this right, Patascibacteria, which normally don't survive in water with lots of oxygen, meaning they've somehow figured out a completely different way to live. The microbes aren't just floating around aimlessly either. Some of them are forming mats that act like little communities, with some organisms helping each other and others preying on their neighbors. Stuff scientists have never seen in an ice-covered lake before. The lake's giving researchers a chance to see how life adapts under these insane conditions. This is the Weddell Sea Polynya, one of Antarctica's strangest mysteries. It's a massive stretch of open water, hundreds of square miles wide, sitting smack in the middle of sea ice that should be frozen solid in temperatures well below minus 30 degrees Celsius. Most of the southern ocean should be a solid sheet of ice, yet this giant hole keeps reappearing, and sometimes it sticks around for months. Scientists have some idea about why it happens. Sometimes warm water from deep in the ocean rises to the surface, and sometimes really strong winds, as powerful as hurricanes, push the floating ice away from that spot. But even so, scientists still can't predict exactly when this hole will show up. It appeared from 1974 to 76, then basically disappeared for 40 years, then popped back up in 2016 and 17. Nobody knows why it takes these long breaks, but this isn't just a weird-looking hole in the ice. It actually affects the whole planet. When ocean water freezes into ice, the salt doesn't freeze with it. It gets left behind in the water. That makes the water heavier and denser. This heavy water sinks all the way down to the ocean floor and pushes other water out of the way. Kind of like how dropping a stone into a pool makes ripples spread out. But instead of ripples, this creates a massive slow-moving current that travels all around the world's oceans. This sinking water is thought to help produce Antarctic bottom water, which drives the global ocean conveyor belt. This belt carries heat, oxygen, and nutrients everywhere. It can even affect the weather in places thousands of miles away from Antarctica. So, even though it looks like just an opening in the ice, that hole is actually connected to weather patterns and ocean currents across the entire Earth. Pripyat Hospital, officially known as Hospital Number 126, treated people immediately after the Chernobyl disaster. In the hours following it, dozens of firefighters, plant workers, and first responders who were exposed to high doses of radiation were rushed here for urgent care. Their highly irradiated clothing was then hastily dumped in the hospital's basement, which is now one of the most dangerously contaminated areas in Pripyat. The most critical patients were later transferred to a specialist hospital in Moscow, but now, 126 sits completely empty and decaying. Equipment sits rusting in the rooms, peeling paint flakes off the walls and the floors are cracked. Beds are still in the wards though, with some torn sheets or medical supplies left behind. The maternity ward, that's especially eerie. It's got cribs still sitting in place and some baby dolls on the floor. Operating rooms have surgical tools left out, and through all of it, nature has started creeping in through the broken windows. These eerie images were taken at one of Pripyat's kindergartens, left exactly as it was when the city was evacuated. The shelves are still filled with toys, some broken, dusty, but mostly intact. Cribs and small beds are scattered around, some with old dolls or stuffed animals still lying on them. The walls are peeling and faded pictures of animals and fairy tale scenes cover the walls. The place is right near the city center, so after the evacuation, nobody came back. At least not permanently. Outside, weeds and small trees are starting to creep in through the windows, and the flooring is cracked and decayed. Even decades later, nothing has been removed aside from the occasional looter. Looking at these images, it's a strange mix of ordinary and unsettling. Normal objects left behind, yet everything abandoned in a hurry. The Azure swimming pool in Pripyat is one of the more unusual abandoned spots you'll see photos of. It was built in the 70s, a large indoor pool, diving boards, changing rooms, a small gym area. After the disaster, the pool stayed open for a short bit, mainly for liquidators and plant workers to wash off contamination, but eventually it was, of course, completely abandoned. As you can probably tell looking at it, the tiles are cracked, faded, and covered in dust. The pool's upper balcony and viewing areas are crumbling with broken railings and peeling paint. The diving boards hang rusted in place, and the pool is empty, exposing the floor underneath, giving the whole building, just like pretty much everywhere else in Pripyat, a post-apocalyptic vibe. Hotel Policia was one of the tallest buildings in Pripyat, a landmark of the city before the disaster. Built in the 70s, it was meant to host visitors to the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, along with engineers and city officials. After the explosion, being that the building was so tall, it was actually pretty useful in the emergency response. The upper floors were used as makeshift observation points and temporary offices for the cleanup operations, and helicopters used the roof to coordinate flights in and out of the city. Today, the hotel is completely falling apart. The lobby's empty, with cracked floors and scattered debris everywhere. Broken furniture, elevator shafts are open and rusting, windows are shattered, and graffiti covers most of the walls. On the outside, the building still towers over Pripyat, but the place is deteriorating, with concrete crumbling and metal corroding. Horatio Gordon Robley was a British soldier. He was also a collector of something most people today would consider pretty horrifying. During his time in New Zealand, he became obsessed with mokomakai, the preserved tattooed heads of Maori people. Originally, these heads had deep cultural and spiritual meaning, but by the late 1800s, they'd become novelty items to trade and collect, especially with European colonials, who saw them more as circus sideshow type items rather than sacred objects. So in this photo from 1895, Robley sits proudly in front of dozens of these preserved heads mounted on a wall, like some kind of grotesque art exhibit. Some of the heads had belonged to fallen warriors, some were taken from slaves. And sure, the image is disturbing, being that it's a guy with a pretty morbid hobby, but it also perfectly encapsulates how colonials viewed indigenous culture. Instead of respect or understanding, these remains were displayed like souvenirs. In 1918, the Russian Revolution was in full swing, and the Bolsheviks had one last loose end to tie up: Romanovs. Tsar Nicholas II, along with his wife Alexandra, family, and a few loyal staff members, were all being held at a house that would become the site of one of the most morbid executions in the country's history. Early in the morning, on July 17th, they were taken to the basement and they never came out. It was brutal, to say the least. Some survived the first round of fire thanks to the jewels sewn into their clothes, but they were finished off afterwards with the spikes on the men's bayonets. bodies. This photo shows what the room looked like after the bodies were cleared out. Katharina Datzel was locked away in a German psychiatric hospital in the early 1900s. There's not much known about her diagnosis or how she ended up there, but one thing survived. A photo of her standing next to a life-sized figure that she made out of straw and bits of bedding. It's pretty eerie. She reportedly built the straw man as a form of protest. Some accounts say it was meant to represent the Kaiser, and she attacked it out of frustration and rage. Whether that's true or not, the image itself is disturbing even without the context. And it's not just the straw figure, it's what it came out of. Isolation, powerlessness, a person making something just to have someone or something to direct their anger at. Alright, well, this has been pretty heavy. Let's talk about McDonald's. A different kind of heavy. A heavy in the bowel region. Are you scared of clowns? Even now, some people find Ronald McDonald kinda off-putting, but the first Ronald McDonald wasn't the bright, bouncy clown we know today. Is Ronald McDonald even around? I actually haven't seen him in a long time. Anyway, he looked like this, the first one. Played by Willard Scott, the original Ronald wore a paper cup for a nose, a tray of food as a hat, and just had a more haphazard, thrown together kind of look in general. Makes him slightly more unsettling in my opinion. There's a photo of him grinning directly into the camera holding a burger, looking more like something an AI would spit out if you typed in nasty fast food clown man. This version of Ronald was part of a local TV promotion in Washington, D.C., and it was thrown together pretty fast, as you can probably tell. Fitting though, for McDonald's, fast is kind of their whole thing. Scott had previously played Bozo the Clown, an equally creepy clown. When McDonald's wanted a similar character, he basically slapped some fast food on his head and improvised. And the result was a mascot that kind of looked like he might offer you fries with one hand and then drag you into the sewer with the other. Anyway, McDonald's rebranded Ronald soon after, giving him a full makeover to be more, acceptable for human society. This is Hamida Jandoubi, a convicted killer on his way to his death. He was the last man to be executed by guillotine in France, 1977. Yes, 77. The same year, audiences were flocking to the theater to watch ships fly around in space. As a farm boy learned to wield a lightsaber and harness the power of the Force, folks in France were watching a man's head get lobbed off in the town square. It wasn't actually quite like that. It was not a public batting, but still, that is pretty bonkers. This photo shows Robert Falcon Scott and his team standing at the South Pole, finally reaching their goal after weeks of brutal conditions. They are clearly worn down, frostbitten, starving, and emotionally wrecked. But the worst part, when they got there, they realized they weren't even the first. The Norwegian team, led by Roald Amundsen, had beaten them by over a month. The disappointment in their faces is unmistakable. It's more than disappointment, really. This was the realization that all the pain, the danger, it had all been for second place. And things only got worse from there. The trek back was hell. Edgar Evans was the first to die, likely from a mix of injuries and exhaustion. Then Lawrence Oates suffered from frostbite, and knowing he was slowing the others down, he just walked off into a blizzard to die on his own terms. Scott, Wilson, and Bowers pushed on, but a storm eventually trapped them inside their tent. For 9 straight days, they were stuck, freezing and starving, just 11 miles from the supply depot that could have saved them. All 3 died in that tent. A filmmaker was going through bonus material on a DVD of Charlie Chaplin's 1928 film The Circus. They noticed something weird in an old newsreel from the premiere. The clip seems pretty ordinary. It's just people walking around outside the theater entrance in Los Angeles, but then this woman walks into frame, passes by a car on the street, and she's holding a thin black rectangular object right up to her ear. She seems to be talking into it, using the exact same posture we all use when we're on our phones. But again, this is 1928. Mobile phones, of course, were not around, and two-way radios were these massive, bulky things that you couldn't exactly carry around casually like this. Now, historians say it's probably an early portable hearing aid, maybe an acousticon, which was being developed around this time, but those things also had a lot of long wires running out of them, which doesn't really look to be the case here, so I don't know. In 2019, someone dug up this photo from the University of Washington archives. Something about the image caught their eye. Can you tell what it is? One of these kids is a dead ringer for Greta Thunberg, but this photo is from 1898. It's 3 kids working at a gold mine in the Yukon Territory of Canada. It'd be pretty standard historical photo if it weren't for the Greta girl. The resemblance is so strong that people immediately started talking about time travel. Jokingly, maybe, but not for some, I imagine. I mean, is Greta Thunberg some kind of ancient soul or an agent sent from the distant future jumping through history to influence humanity? Maybe she was sent back to warn people about the environmental destruction of the gold rush and got pulled back to our time to deal with the modern climate crisis. There's this marble funerary relief at the J. Paul Getty Museum in California, carved around 100 BCE. It's called Grave Niskos of an Enthroned Woman with an Attendant. The sculpture shows a woman sitting on a throne with a young female attendant standing in front of her. The servant is holding out this thin rectangular thing that really does look like a laptop. The proportions, the clear separation between what looks like a base and a lid, it's pretty uncanny. It also looks a lot like a pizza box, either way, not at the time. Now, the main explanation here is that this is a wax writing tablet which ancient Greeks used for taking notes and writing messages, and yeah, that's probably it. But I get the conspiracy surrounding this. I mean, the way the attendant is presenting it really looks like she's showing a report on a screen, or that she's about to grab a slice of pizza. Take a gander at this photo when Brazil won the 1962 FIFA World Cup in Chile. 1962 communication technology was still pretty limited. Landlines, letters, telegraphs, that's what people had. But in this photograph, capturing the moment right after Brazil's victory, players celebrating with the trophy, crowds going nuts with excitement. Well, down in the foreground, there's someone holding a small-ish rectangular object. It looks a bit like a mobile phone or maybe a small digital camera. Stuff like that is pure science fiction at the time. Small film cameras existed, sure, but it didn't look like this. They were big and boxy. This almost looks like someone taking a vertical photo for social media, decades before social media was a thing. Maybe it's a small radio or some kind of medical device, maybe, but am I going with time travel? Yes, I am. This painting is called The Expected One, painted in 1860 by Austrian artist Ferdinand Georg Waldmüller. It's a romantic scene. There's a young man wading off in the dirt path with a pink flower, presumably waiting for this young woman who's approaching him. She's dressed in typical clothing of the time. Everything looks period appropriate, but she's walking with her head down, eyes are fixed downward, totally focused on this small, dark, rectangular object she's holding up with both hands. I mean, you get where I'm going. It looks like she's texting. Her posture, the way she's carrying herself, it's the first thing you notice. It looks identical to someone scrolling through their phone on the street today. She's completely absorbed in whatever this object is, ignoring the nature around her, ignoring the man who's crouching there waiting for her with a flower. One explanation is that this is a small prayer book. It was common for women to carry while walking in that era, but it just looks more like a phone. She's looking down at it, like it looks like she's reading it, but the thing isn't open like a book would be, hence why it looks more to us like a cell phone. Here's a famous one. If you didn't know any better, wouldn't you say this is an astronaut? I mean, it couldn't be though. This is at the new Cathedral of Salamanca in Spain, which was built between the 16th and 18th centuries. Renaissance and Gothic architecture. The carving is on a door called the Porta de Ramos, where you have all the usual stuff you'd expect to see in a place like this. Gargoyles, historical figures, but then there's this spaceman looking dude. It's so uncanny that some view this as an undeniable proof. Time travel or some ancient knowledge of spaceflight passed down by who knows who or what. And how else could a 17th century sculptor know to depict a man in a modern spacesuit? Is there a logical explanation for this? Is this some knight who just happens to look like an astronaut? Well, no, it really is meant to be a man floating in space. See, I'm kind of cheating with this one. See, the carvings on that specific door got heavily damaged over time and needed to be restored. During the major restoration in 1992, the chief restorer, Miguel Romero, followed an old tradition that allows stonemasons to leave their personal signature on the work that they do. So he had the astronaut figure carved into the stone. So it's not actually from the 1600s, but it's still really cool that it's there amongst all the biblical beasts. This series of images were recorded by a webcam at a German research station in Antarctica. The station keeps a camera running to document weather and conditions around the base, and that footage is later stitched into time-lapse videos. On August 10th, 2012, one of those time-lapse clips ended up drawing some attention. In a short stretch of the video, a round, blurry object appears in the sky above the station. It's circular, silvery, and seems to hover in place rather than move across the frame. Then, just as suddenly as it appears, it's gone. The object only shows up in a few frames. People slowed the video down, scrubbed through it frame by frame, and debated what they were actually seeing. Some pointed out that the footage is time-lapse, meaning long stretches of time are compressed into seconds, which makes brief appearances like this harder to judge. So, what do you think? Genuine UFO? Were they testing something at the station? Share your thoughts down below. And take a look at this, a massive, almost perfectly rectangular block of ice sitting out in Antarctica. And no, it wasn't carved by humans. The photo you're looking at here was taken by NASA scientist Jeremy Arbeck during an Operation Icebridge flight over the northern Antarctic Peninsula on October 16th, 2018. He saw this strangely sharp-cornered, almost perfectly rectangular iceberg floating nearby, and then he saw another and another. Arbeck spotted a bunch of these tabular bergs bobbing around that day. The term tabular iceberg just means icebergs that are flat and rectangular, almost like a tabletop. One he photographed, later called Tabular B, had such straight edges they almost don't seem natural. But these icebergs form when chunks break off the edges of ice shelves. They're fresh, so the wind and waves haven't rounded them out yet. They look like massive minimalist art pieces though. The mountain you're looking at is way down in the southern Ellsworth Mountains in Antarctica, about 4,150 feet tall. From above, it looks insane, like a perfect Egyptian pyramid was built in the middle of the ice. The photo that made it go viral came out in 2016. The mountain's been there forever, mostly hidden in the snow. People at the nearby Patriot Hill Station have probably seen it without realizing how weird it looks from up above. Over millions of years, ice and snow have slowly worn the rock down. Water fills cracks during the day, freezes at night, expands, and eventually breaks off chunks. Face is eroded at the same rate, leaving a mountain that looks pretty uncannily similar to a pyramid. At least, that's the explanation they want you to believe. That's probably the case. I just really want there to be a secret ancient pyramid out in Antarctica. 2016, a satellite snapped a strange image over Heard Island in the southern Indian Ocean. Clouds over the volcanic island had broken into 10 dark spinning holes, each about 8 miles wide. The gaps twist and curve like tiny whirlpools frozen in the sky. At the heart of it all is Mawson Peak, a 9,000-foot active volcano sitting in the middle of Heard Island. It's small compared to the peaks that usually create these cloud swirls, but somehow it churned out a row of spinning holes that were way more intense and tightly packed than usual. Normally cloud swirls drift out in straight, even lines, but here the holes were twisting and shifting unpredictably. But 10 perfectly spaced dark voids violently spinning above a remote volcanic island? I mean, that is some serious imagery right there. This is a radar image of a very strange mountain range in Antarctica. Under nearly 2,000 feet of ice, there's a mountain range the size of the European Alps in East Antarctica. The Gembertsev Mountains. No one actually saw them until the Soviets discovered them in 1958, but even now, they're completely covered, so we only know what they look like from radar. The range is full of jagged peaks and deep valleys that somehow survived hundreds of millions of years of glaciers and ice sheets. Some of the rocks are 1 billion years old, formed when the supercontinent Rodinia pushed plates together. Later on, shifts in the Earth's crust, like rifting and tectonic movement, basically re-lifted the mountains, keeping them from getting ground flat. During the Antarctica Gamburtsev Province project missions in 2007 to 2009, aircraft flew across East Antarctica, radar mapping every ridge and slope they could find. Scientists found liquid water running through the valleys almost 2 miles beneath the ice, which was crazy. You'd expect everything to be frozen solid down there. They also used seismic scans, basically listening to vibrations passing through the ground to see how the mountains sit underground. These scans showed the mountain's roots plunging all the way down to the Earth's mantle, meaning they're anchored deep in the planet, which explains how they've survived for so long without being completely worn away. In 1986, right after the Chernobyl disaster, a group of people known as the liquidators were called in to clean up the radioactive mess. This photo shows some of them at work, and if you look closely at the bottom, you'll see these strange white streaks on the film. Those are actually caused by radiation. A lot of these workers were not trained specifically for this type of work. Some were firefighters and soldiers, but there were also regular people thrown into the fire. They didn't have much protective gear, so some of them had to improvise with whatever they could find, like leather and lead plates. They worked in insane conditions, dealing with radiation levels that would have made most people collapse, and a lot of them ended up seriously sick later. Some died from exposure, and despite all that, they kept going, trying to contain one of the worst nuclear disasters in history. This photo shows one of the most infamous spots inside Chernobyl, the Elephant's Foot. Right after the 1986 explosion, a lot of the molten reactor core sank beneath the plant, and what formed was this massive wrinkled blob of radioactive sludge made from melted fuel, metal, sand, and concrete. It got its name because, as you can probably tell, it kind of looks like the thick, wrinkly skin of an elephant. Back when it first formed, it was insanely deadly. Just standing nearby for a few minutes would kill you. To even get a picture, people had to bounce cameras off mirrors so no one had to actually get too close. The heat was so intense it was literally burning through the floors beneath it. Nowadays it's cooled down and isn't instantly lethal, but it's still one of the most radioactive things on planet Earth, sealed off deep in the plant. What you're looking at here is a black fungus that's been growing in various parts of Chernobyl. It grows toward radiation. The fungus is called, let me see if I can pronounce this right, Cladosporium sphaerospermum. This is a photo of it spreading on the walls of the reactor's damaged areas. It contains melanin, the same pigment that gives human skin its color, but in this case, it seems to help the fungus feed on radiation. It's almost like it's photosynthesizing, except instead of sunlight, it's using deadly gamma rays to grow. Experiments have shown that the fungus actually grows faster when exposed to radiation. Most life would die instantly in that environment, but this stuff is growing just fine. Scientists are now looking at it as a potential tool for radiation protection, maybe even for astronauts on long space missions where radiation is, of course, a huge problem. This is a comparison between what frogs are supposed to look like in the forest of Chernobyl and what they look like now. Parts of Chernobyl, scientists discovered something really unusual: eastern tree frogs with completely black skin. Normally these frogs are green or maybe brownish, but in radioactive zones a lot of them had turned jet black, a condition called melanism. Researchers think the frogs are producing extra melanin to protect themselves from harmful UV rays or even radiation. They're still not entirely sure whether radiation triggered genetic changes or just made the frogs crank out more melanin, but it's obvious the disaster played a role. Some of the most haunting images of worn down abandoned places you'll ever see have been taken in Pripyat. The amusement park is probably the most famous. It never actually opened. It was scheduled to launch just days after the Chernobyl disaster, so no one ever got to actually use it. Today, the Ferris wheel is still standing, rusted and motionless, with the empty frames of bumper cars and a carousel sitting nearby. Everything is decaying, rusted to hell, and completely frozen in time. Picnic tables and benches have been left empty, pathways are cracked, and weeds and small trees have started to take over the area. All this was designed for crowds. Spaces for families, areas for kids to play. It's hard, not to feel slightly somber looking at these images. Well, it doesn't get much more apocalyptic than this picture. In one of the schools in Pripyat, there's a room where the floor is just covered with gas masks. The filters have been looted by people looking for tiny bits of silver inside. What's weird though is that these masks were barely even used. A week before the disaster, students had been trained on how to put them on, but when the meltdown happened and people were being evacuated, they were told not to wear the masks. But why? Well, the communist leadership was worried that if people were told to put on gas masks, they'd panic, i.e. everyone would know there was a serious mess up. So to hell with people's health, the masks were all left behind.